Well, members of the public have been vocalizing their issues with the U.S. healthcare system in the aftermath of the CEO killing. Some going as far as to criticize the McDonald's employee for alerting the police of the alleged killer's whereabouts. And joining us to help analyze what this means about public sentiment toward corporate America is Wharton School Professor of Marketing, Americus Reed. Americus, good to see you. Does this say something about corporate America, or is this really about healthcare and an issue that people have some strong feelings about?
Well, it's great to be with you, John. I appreciate the opportunity. I think it's a little bit of both. I think that to a certain extent, we are seeing sort of the fed up everyday man, everyday woman, everyday person that is looking at corporate greed and having an understanding now in the sort of year of social media that, you know, there's a corporate entity out there that is putting potentially profits over health and things like that. So we're seeing that as a sort of a general context. I think we're also kind of seeing this idea more specifically around consumers sort of taking it up to sort of say, hey, you know, we don't want to be the victim in these narratives around PR crises that happen to companies that are making lots of money. And so these CEOs can become sort of the villain that represents all of this corporate greed. And so consumers now have something to rage against. So we're seeing more and more of this stuff in terms of the wake-up call more generally in corporate America, John. But I think specifically in the healthcare space, because it's quite well documented as to claim denials and other sorts of things that consumers look at and they say to themselves, I don't understand what's going on here. Why are we being treated this way while, you know, corporate individuals who are in the C-suite are making millions of dollars?
But at the same time, there seem to be some companies that people just love, and the CEOs, founders as well. I mean, Elon Musk is riding very high right now on the success of his products, technology, vision. And so there's a bit of a bifurcation here, no?
Yeah, I love that point, John. The bifurcation comes with respect to something that I think is important that you're pointing to, and that's the idea of authenticity. So people look at Elon Musk and they say, love him or hate him, he speaks his mind. He doesn't care what, you know, critics think. He's going to say what he believes, and he's perceived, at least, as being this very authentic individual. If you contrast that with other CEOs that may not have a lot of airtime in terms of presenting themselves as a public face, you can see where this dissonance can come from, because those CEOs that aren't prepared to sort of be in the spotlight, to put their own personal brands out there as part of the company brands, can suffer this kind of thing where they're not seen as authentic, and instead they're seen as more greedy individuals that are in the back office making profits and money over the careful lives of individuals and the safety of consumers.
Americus, you make an interesting point about social media perhaps being some of the fuel behind this, but I'm wondering too, if it's not also the political division that we've been living with in this country for a number of years now, and to have leaders that also, like Elon Musk, decide to speak their mind, love them or hate them, sort of potentially open up the door to behavior that before was not deemed socially acceptable. Do you believe that that is also the case? And if so, if you are corporate America, a healthcare or other company, what do you do about it?
That's a great point, Courtney. I think that it is indeed the case. We're seeing it in the literature in the sense that there's more of an openness to come out and say sorts of things, even if they're provocative, even if they're potentially macabre, to sort of criticize and go after corporate America. And there is this additional context that you point to, Courtney, that has to do with sort of the rule of law and what is the role that laws and enforcement play with respect to individuals and street justice that might be going on with respect to some of these issues. I think your second point, Courtney, is super important, because I think it's a moment where companies can rise to the level to deal with this crisis, to say to themselves, hey, this is an opportunity to go out there and rebrand what it is that we do, to validate the concerns of what consumers are saying in terms of their reaction to this entire event, and come out and show a plan of action to sort of control our own narrative so that we can get out front, if we are a company like UnitedHealth, and sort of discuss all these issues and begin to sort of recraft what it is that we do, so consumers aren't walking around with all of this kind of latent pent-up anger.
I know that obviously UnitedHealthcare took the action of taking down some of their executive photos, perhaps worried that this was not an isolated incident. Do you think that there are other, I don't want to call them simple measures, but things that maybe companies should be doing until they can really get their hands on what's going on and what the sentiment is really happening and bubbling below the surface of some of this consumer, I don't even know what word, upset is not the right word.
Yeah, it's a great point, Courtney. That listen, consumer vigilantism, street justice. I mean, that's what we're talking about here, and it's kind of amazing to watch the sympathy that is being given to the individual who allegedly committed this heinous act. And so, I think your point's a great point, Courtney, which is to say that companies have to sort of walk that fine line of keeping their employees safe, but there's also an opportunity to sort of also come out and make sure that they're getting ahead of the story and explain to people, here's what's actually going on that may be different from what you perceive us as a sort of the villain in this story. And so there's an opportunity to tell that narrative that can perhaps turn the table just a little bit. Let me just make one more additional point, Courtney. And that's this idea. We have to be very careful with social media, because in social media, what gets shared in social media are the negative things, the macabre things, the very provocative sorts of things. So oftentimes when there's outrage in social media, it's amplified because there's so much of disproportionate extreme reactions that happen in social media that don't necessarily represent the broad swath of typical views that folks in this country might have.
That's a very good point. I think there have been a lot of instances of that in much less serious circumstances, but I'm thinking of Bud Light and Target with sort of other social media amplifications when they made decisions that perhaps angered a small group of people, but it seemed much larger because of the amplification on social media. Americus Reed from the Wharton School, thank you very much for joining us on this very sensitive issue.
Stay on top of the latest in identity, marketing, branding, and pop culture by following Americus Reed on social media, or learn more at americusreed.com.